Happy New Year. Today is the first Sunday of Advent in the year 2021. There are a lot of ways that we tell time, and keeping track of the year is just one of them. I think one of the simplest ways of keeping track of time and counting it is simply watching day and night as they pass, as the sun rises and the sun sets. When I was a child, my curfew was told by this very metric, or actually, as my dad would say, be home when the streetlights come on. So I knew as a child, when dusk was setting in, and that familiar hum of the lamps came on, it was time to go home, regardless of what the hour actually was. From the earliest days, people kept track of the days by looking to the heavens and watching the stars dance across the sky. This was wonderful at night, but left some challenges in the day. So in the day, they developed sundials to watch the shadows as they moved across the ground, giving a rhythm and a syncopation to their days, for times and places to meet. Throughout the centuries, then they began to develop clocks. Some clocks that measured time in the amount of time that it took a candle to burn down. Some that measured in terms of how long it took a vessel of water to empty out. And then the day was measured in how many vessels or how many candles could be burned or emptied in that 12-hour period from sunrise to sunset. As the days continued, and they tracked them by the day with the sundial and the night through the stars, they developed the need to tell longer periods of time, both looking back into the past, remembering what was, and also projecting into the future. And with that, they developed calendars. Calendars that were carved into stone. Calendars that were carved into wood. But also, they developed the remembering of time as events written into the corporate mind frame of the community. Written into the myths and the stories that were told, remembering the year that happened, the birth, the death, the leaving, the homecoming, the year the community felt broke, the year the community felt put back together. Though, even when we consider our smallest units of time, seconds and minutes, even into hours, the idea of how we count takes us back to ancient Mesopotamia. See, if you look at your right hand and you use your thumb to count the 4 fingers, you'll notice that the creases on the front of your fingers where your knuckles are on the back divide each of your 4 fingers into 3 parts. Now, if you use your thumb to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then you use your 5 fingers on your left hand to each represent a dozen. So when you get to 12, you hold up a finger and then keep counting. Your right hand will count and your left hand will total 12 times 5, which leaves you at 60. 60 being a number that is easily divisible by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30. A very convenient way of counting and doing math on the run in a society that predates both iPhones and calculators. One of my favorite ways to count time was an old tradition that I learned in elementary school. It was called the Christmas chain, 25 paper rings, all about 1 inch tall and about 4.5 inches wide, that were folded over and stapled together to make a long loop. Now, the 25 paper rings, 24 of them were all green, and the last one was always red or yellow. The last one represented Christmas Day. And so, starting on December 1st and going all the way through, every morning when I would wake up as a kid, I would rip off one of the green rings. A way to physically count time, a way to physically interact with time, one step at a time, on a journey to get you there, the big day, the day that Santa left his bounty, the day we remember the gift of the manger. So let me ask this question. What are the other ways that we have told time or remembered time over this past church year? Maybe we have counted the number of times that we've left our homes without a mask and had to go home to get them. Maybe we've counted the months that we were not able to see our family. Maybe we've counted the number of minutes we spent crying tears of joy when we finally got to see our family, finally got to hold them, hug them, embrace them. Maybe we've been counting the months and the years that friends and family have stayed safe and stayed healthy despite a worldwide pandemic. But I'd like to offer this idea. What about counting time in inches? On the face of one of my favorite watches, an inch covers the time of about an hour and a half, and a lot of life can change in an hour and a half. If your phone has ever rang in the middle of the night, waking you up, and I pray it hasn't, you know a lot of life can change in an hour and a half. Or if you've ever received an unexpected and joyful call from a friend or a relative, you know that a lot of life can change in an hour and a half, in the best of ways. And yet still, time moves forward, an inch at a time. And a lot can happen in an inch. For our community of Faith Lutheran Church, it was a year ago, on Advent 1, 2020, that we first lit our faith candles for worship. The idea was to create an Advent tradition for home use that we could use for worship every time we gathered on Zoom in the unknown world of the pandemic, wherever that 52 weeks would lead us. That 52 weeks was counted in a lot of ways. It was a time of exile from our sanctuary. It was a time of worship in the parking lot, a time of recording a Christmas pageant that still lives online. It was a time of return home to 730 Collingwood Avenue. It was a time of sadness, as we have had to say goodbye to so many loved members of our community as they have entered into the kingdom triumphant. And yet, when I look at my worship candle, and I measure just how much wax has burned off over the past 52 weeks, it comes out to be just a little over an inch. See, I believe that the way we measure time is always a lot smaller than the way that we remember time. We remember how time feels, what we did, that one time or time after time as we've lived our lives. We remember the countless times that we got home or to the office or to church, and that feeling of familiar homecoming born within. We remember the feeling of seeing loved ones and friends time after time, and we remember that first feeling of the sting of death when we showed up and we knew that they would not, when we reached for the phone and knew that we could not call them. And in this season, we remember the journey to Bethlehem and those who we have shared it with along the way. We remember those who first brought us on this journey to the manger, those that we carry in our hearts, and those who sit in the pews and worship with us today in this new year. We measure this 1 inch at a time, as inches add up to feet and yards and miles, as we drive to church, as we walk down the aisle to receive the sacrament of Holy Communion. We measure this 1 inch at a time, as the inches mark the hours and the years, one after another. Time spent with those that we love, some who are with us and some who no longer are. We remember that holy night that is not measured in inches, but is measured in silence on a silent night, measured in the first cries of a newborn child. A night that is measured in new parents' love for their baby, and a night that is measured in God's love for the entire world. Remembering God's faithfulness and promises, I look at my faith candle and I joyfully wonder what the next inch will hold for us as the people of God together. Amen.